From Royal Communications Incorporated, good morning and welcome to King's News Run, a 45 minutes news presentation about Liberia, Africa, and the rest of the world. Today is Tuesday, April 29, 2025, and I'm Newton, TOKPAH presenting. Stories we're following this morning. Financial Intelligence Unit Agency of Liberia finds Lone Star Cell MTN Mobile $25 million Liberian dollars for failure to comply with the country's anti-money laundering and countering financing of tourism compliance policy. Center for Transparency and Accountability warns President Joseph Boakai a majority block against defiance of Supreme Court ruling, says lawmakers who are supporting Rachel Kuhn and the executive continue engagement undermines Liberia's democracy and constitutional rule. National Patriotic Party acting national chairman says Liberia will never experience another war without the NPP endorsing plans surrounding civil conflicts. George Mova calls on President Joseph Boakai to engage stakeholders to resolve the nation's hatred and reconcile the citizens. And away from Liberia, at least 68 African migrants have been killed in a U.S. airstrike on a detention center in Houthi-controlled northwestern Yemen, the armed group's TV channel says. A court case which found Nigeria's leading football ballers to be negligent for the death of a player has been hailed as a landmark ruling by Global Players Union. Fifth Pro said these plus many more. The news bulletin are all packaged. We'll take a very short break to be right back. Thanks for joining us and welcome back. Let's have the news bulletin. The Financial Intelligence Agency of Liberia has imposed a fine of $25 million Liberian dollars against the Lone Star Cell MTN Mobile Money Incorporated. According to the FIA press release, the decision to fine the mobile network subsidiary company of the Lone Star Cell MTN GSN was necessitated by its failure to comply with Liberia's anti-money laundering and countering and financing of terrorism compliance policy procedures, control and obligation as provided for in Liberia's AMLCFT Act of 2021. The race-based inspections conducted by the FIA from September 2nd to the 16th, 2024 have found that LCMMI has failed to establish an independent board separate from its parent company Lone Star Cell and TMGSM. FIA finds this inadequacy of not implementing appropriate corporate governance measures in the LCMMI AML CFT compliance system as risky and troubling. The agency is extremely baffled by the mobile money operators' failure to address high major violation of not establishing its own board separate from its parent company, Lone Star Cell MTN GSN Incorporated, since December 2018, when it was first identified by the CPL up to present. The Center for Transparency and Accountability in Liberia has made a robust court in ensuring full compliance with the Supreme Court recent ruling that declared Councillor Funati Kofa as the legitimately elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. The High Court final ruling in the Bill of Information has since declared the majority bloc and Rachel Kuhn actions as unconstitutional. In a press statement issued Monday, Center criticized both the executive and legislative branches for what it termed as an alarming disregard for the country's legal system, and the Coast Authority. The Center for Transparency and Accountability also warned that ongoing defiance by lawmakers who are supporting Representative Rachel Kuhn and the executive's continual engagement undermines Liberia's democracy and constitutional rule. The statement added that even though the majority bloc has filed a petition for reargument, the Supreme Court's April 23rd decision remains binding unless overturned by the court itself. Sinta at the same time urged the President Joseph Boakai to respect the Supreme Court's ruling and cut ties with the majority bloc, further warning that failure to do so risks extending the legislative impasse and harming national governance. The statement was read by Sinta's program manager, Anthony Dan Yakola. The acting national chairman of the National Patriotic Party says the NPP will never accept for another war to come in the country. NPP acting national chairman Josh Moba warned those beating war drums to be aware that once NPP do not join any approval for war, it will never happen in Liberia. Addressing a press conference in Congo Town, Anthony Moba encouraged President Joseph Boakai to begin engaging opposition politicians in order to resolve the hatred and reconcile the people. According to him, the country does not belong to the Unity Party alone, and as such, President Joseph Boakai must engage other stakeholders in the country. The Liberty Party is calling on all political actors to remain calm and prioritize the rule of law amid the ongoing leadership impasse at the House of Representatives. The party expressed concern over the continuous standoff, warning that the paralysis within the legislative branch threatens national governance and development at a time when President Joseph Boakai's administration is striving to restore Liberia's global image and deliver essential services. In a press release issued in Monrovia on Monday, the Liberty Party noted that dysfunction in one branch of government, particularly the House of Representatives, undermines the constitutional principle of coordination among the three branches and could severely impede progress in the country. The release, however, welcomed President Joseph Boakai's recognition of the Supreme Court's recent ruling in the matter and praised the majority bloc's decision to file a motion for reargument as a show of respect for the judiciary system. The party further called on all stakeholders to support the ongoing legal process and urged the majority and minority blacks in the House of Representatives to embrace the mediation as a path to resolution, emphasizing the need to put national interests above personal or political gains. The Liberty Party has meanwhile condemned efforts to politicize the crisis, warning any actions that could escalate tensions further. Kanga Lawrence reaffirmed the party's commitment to peace, democratic governance, and the constitutional rule of law. The Environmental Protection Agency, with support from the Environmental Justice Foundation, has embarked on a two-day deliberation aimed at reaching the treaty on biodiversity areas beyond national jurisdiction in Monrovia. Speaking at the ceremony marking the beginning of the deliberation, the director of multilateral environmental agreements at the Environmental Protection Agency, Arthur Baker, reminded Liberians of the responsibility in safeguarding the planet biodiversity. Baker, who served as president on behalf of EPA Acting Executive Director Doe Bole, said Liberians must sign the treaty on the preservation of all the species beyond national boundaries. The EPA Director for Multilateral Environmental Agreements stressed the need for the national legislature to sign all international agreements in and preserving the ecosystem. Three opposition political parties have called on President Joseph Boakai to lead efforts at handling and resolving the impasse at the House of Representatives. The Liberia's People Democratic Party, the People's Unification Party, and the National Patriotic Party said the continued leadership conflict at the lower house is embarrassing. Reading the press statement on behalf of the three political parties, PUP National Secretary General Moses Kuya said the LPDP, NPP, and PUP have accepted the ruling of the Supreme Court and appreciated the response of President Joseph Boakai. According to Kuya, the utterances of their colleagues in the opposition have the proclivity to threaten the peace and stability in the country. The LPDP, NPP, and the PUP further said it condemned all utterances that tend to threaten the existence as a country and as a people, taking into account the visible scars of the 14 years of civil conflict in Liberia. The United Blind Association of Liberia has expressed disappointment on officials of government, civil society organizations, and non-governmental organizations for what they describe as neglect of people with visually impaired in the country. The association's president, Wilfred Jiwon, said the consistent disregard shown by public officials is a reflection of a broader societal indifference to the plight of disabled persons in Liberia. Reverend Jivon spoke during a program marking the 30th anniversary celebration of the United Blind Association of Liberia held in the township of Ghana's on Monday. According to him, the issue of people with disabilities is not taken seriously, adding that it is a continue or it continue to affect disabled community in several directions. The former president of the Liberal Council of Churches has called on President Joseph Boakai to allow his name to go down in history as the Liberian leader who governs in accordance with the rule of law. Bishop Cotto Brown, General Overseer of the Apostolic Pentecostal Church International, said it does not augur well for the executive to downplay the decision of the Supreme Court. He told reporters Monday during a press conference in Battenville that it is important that the majority and minority blocks of the House of Representatives accept the ruling of the Supreme Court. The former president of the Liberal Council of Churches said Liberians are tired of and overwhelmed by the prolonged impasse at the House of Representatives. The Liberian National Red Cross Society has commemorated World Day for Safety and Health at Work with activities aimed at promoting workplace well-being and raising awareness about occupational safety standards. The event, held in collaboration with the Painesville City Corporation, focused on both the promise and the limitations of technology in preventing workplace accidents. Speaking Monday, Gregory Blamont emphasized that while digital tools and safety procedures can significantly reduce risks, they cannot completely eliminate the possibility of accidents. Gregory Blamont said no system is perfect, and accident may still occur despite having strong safety measures in place. The organization also stressed the importance of first aid knowledge, noting that immediate care is often vital before injured individuals are transported to medical facilities. The Red Cross encouraged both employer and employees to be trained in basic first aid, highlighting that early intervention can save lives and reduce the severity of injuries. Citing information from the John F. Kennedy Memorial Hospital in Monrovia, the Red Cross revealed that nearly 50% patients admitted for emergency care arrived without receiving any first aid. The lack of immediate care often worsens their conditions. The Liberian Red Cross called for greater public awareness and better integration of first aid practices in workplaces across the country, alongside the adoption of emerging digital technologies aimed at enhancing worker safety. That's the shift of the news bulletin. We'll take a break to be right back. Thanks for rejoining us and welcome back. What if you just joining us? A reminder you're listening to King's News, run a 45 minutes news presentation about Liberia, Africa, and the rest of the world. Stories we're following this morning. The Financial Intelligence Unit Agency of Liberia fines Lone Star Cell MTN Mobile $25 million Liberian dollars for failure to comply with the country's anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism compliance policy. Center for Transparency and Accountability warns President Joseph Boakai and majority bloc against defiance of Supreme Court ruling, says lawmakers who are supporting Richard Kuhn and the executive continued engagement undermines Liberia's democracy and constitutional rule. National Patriotic Party acting national chairman says Liberia will never experience another war without the NPP endorsing plans surrounding civil conflicts. George Moba calls on President Joseph Boakai to engage stakeholders to resolve the nation's hatred and reconcile the citizens. And away from Liberia, at least 68 African migrants have been killed in a U.S. airstrike on a detention center in Houthi-controlled northwestern Yemen, the armed group's TV channel says. A court case which found Nigeria's leading football bodies to be negligent for the death of a player has been hailed as a landmark ruling by Global Players Union Fifth Pro. We take another break. When we come back, we'll bring you the voices of the newsmakers. Thanks for rejoining us and welcome back. The Center for Transparency and Accountability in Liberia has made robust court aimed at ensuring full compliance with the Supreme Court recent ruling that declared Councillor Funati Kofa as the legitimately elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. The High Court final ruling in the Bill of Information has since declared the majority bloc and Rachel actions as unconstitutional. In a press statement issued Monday, Sintat criticized both the executive and legislative branches for what it termed as an alarming disregard for the court's authority. The Center for Transparency and Accountability also warned that the ongoing defiance by lawmakers who are supporting Representative Richard Kuhn and the executive's continued engagement undermines Liberia's democracy and constitutional rule. The statement added that even though the majority bloc has filed a petition for re-argument, the Supreme Court's April 23rd decision remains binding unless overturned by the court itself.
President Joseph M. Boakai promised to continuously work with the body constituting a quorum to ensure full functioning of government and appeared reluctant to recognize the legitimacy of Speaker Kofa's leadership or to restore his rights and privileges as affirmed by the Supreme Court. This is despite the fact that the Supreme Court's declaration has null and void all sittings of the House without Speaker, especially when he is present and incapacitated. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, the Center believes that a pronouncement by the President of Liberia to sever ties with the Cohn bloc after the unambiguous quote on constitutional declaration would have demonstrated full compliance with the court's mandate. Instead, continuous engagement with the said faction only amounts to disregard of the court's opinion. it represents a grave setback to the country's improving democratic and constitutional credentials. Center recognizes the contention that it seems unlikely that members of the BROOM bloc will return to sessions presided over by Speaker TOKPAH. Proponents of this contention argue that there is a need for the government to function, and that the president has no alternative but to work with the BROOM bloc since they meet legislative forum. We find this argument troubling, since the Supreme Court has said that a quorum that is not presided over by a legitimately elected speaker is in effect no quorum at all. That also considers the challenge that no rule has been promulgated by the House to enable Speaker TOKPAH to compel members of the BROOM bloc to attend session. In response, Center notes that over 39 years ago, our Constitution mandated the legislature to prescribe said rule to compel attendance of absent members. But
His Center's program manager, Anthony Dan Yakula, speaking. The acting national chairman of the National Patriotic Party says the NPP will never accept for another war to come in this country. NPP acting national chairman Josh Mowat warned those beating war drums to be aware that once NPP do not join NN approval for what, it will never happen in Liberia. Addressing a press conference in Congo Town, Anthony Josh Mowat encouraged President Joseph Walker to begin engaging opposition politicians in order to resolve the hatred and reconcile the people of Liberia.
Liberia, as one of the working countries in Africa that resolves a crisis on the round table, cannot refer to crisis on simple issues that go over the legislature. As a matter of fact, the fact that the Liberian highest court, the Supreme Court, has affected its signature on a petition to re-argue, it means there is no ruling to be enforced until the re-argument is taken, and that's what the law says. So we hear people say, oh, the court ruling to be enforced. No, there's no more ruling until that argument, that re-argument is made, and the result of that re-argument will be the ruling to be enforced. So people have to understand that there's a constructive say-all. And let me say this to all of you. We, as my colleagues from PUP said, we cannot and we will never support as a National Patriotic Party any action formed with the propensity to revisit our occupiers. Since 2003, we affect our signature as a National Patriotic Party government at the time. For peace to be restored in this country, we are always living a part of peace. And we want to warn our colleagues on the other side of the table that are calling for Liberia being chaos, if you one day will do this, you don't have that capacity. Because some of you, when war was going on here, you were in displaced camp, you were in refugee camp. The political party we have here, the National Patriotic Party, once we don't agree for war to come in this country, there will be no war here. You will run around, maybe on one little tree, you will make noise in one little corner. You don't have that ability. Don't put fear in the population. And we want to also say this to the Bwaga government. Liberia needs reconciliation. When you win election, the country is not for you alone. Talk to the opposition leaders. Remember, you won the election with 1%. You still have an obligation to engage other political leaders like Kumi. You still have a responsibility to engage former President George Weah. You have a responsibility to engage other stakeholders to come to Ellen Johnson. All of these political leaders are stakeholders in the country. We need to engage them. And the president must play a pivotal role to ensure that the issue at the cabinet is resolved.
His NPP Acting Chairman George Mowa, they are speaking. The Environmental Protection Agency, with support from the Environmental Justice Foundation, has embarked on a two-day deliberation aimed at reaching the treated on the biodiversity areas beyond national jurisdiction in Monrovia. Speaking at the ceremony marking the beginning of the deliberation, the Director of Multilateral Environmental Agreements at the Environmental Protection Agency, Arthur Bickott, reminded Liberians of the responsibility in safeguarding the planet biodiversity. Bickott, who served as proxy on behalf of the EPA Acting Executive Director Dewey Boley, said Liberians must sign the treaty on the prevention of all the species beyond the national boundaries. We'll bring you that asset in our subsequent broadcast. The opposition political parties have called on President Joseph Boakai to lead efforts at handling and resolving the impasse at the House of Representatives. The Liberia People's Democratic Party, People Unification Party, and the National Patriotic Party said the continued leadership conflict at the lower house is embarrassing. Reading a press statement on behalf of the three political parties, PUP National Secretary General Moses Kuya said the LPDP, NPP, and the PUP have accepted the ruling of the Supreme Court and appreciated the response of the president. According to Kuya, the utterances of their colleagues in the opposition have the proclivity to threaten the peace and stability of the country. The LPDP and NPP, followed by the PUP, it further said it condemned all utterances that tend to threaten the existence as a country and as a people, taking into account the visible scars of the 14 years of civil conflict in Liberia.
As responsible and law-abiding political parties, we accept the ruling of the Supreme Court, and we also appreciate the response of the President of the Republic. However, whilst we don't intend to censor public reactions to the ruling of the Supreme Court, or our attention is particularly drawn to utterances from some political parties. In our view, the utterances of our colleagues have the proclivity to threaten the peace and stability of the nation, something that we do not support. As government in waiting, we will continue to condemn everything that tends to threaten our existence as a country and a people, taking into account the visible scars of the 14-year of incessant conflict in our country. We believe that the best way to settle issues of governance is through peaceful negotiations and not the other way around. We must be emphatic and unequivocal in reminding these parties that the Liberian people are wary of violence, discord, and belligerence. We are not unmindful of the terrible past we have gone through as a country and people. It took us courage, resilience, and fortitude to overcome 14 years of multifaceted civil crisis, which witnessed bloodletting deeply. It also took us all the fibers of our collective beings to defeat the deadly Ebola virus and COVID-19. Cognizant of all these terrible circumstances, we have had and endured as a country and people. To those of you championing instability against the Republic, be reminded that you are not living in Liberia alone. We too are here, and we represent the forces of good. We will defeat you face down, and the motherland will survive. To the Liberian people, we ask you to remain kind, peaceful, and law-abiding, as we are doing everything possible to unite fronts with other stakeholders to ensure that our peace is consolidated in the best interest of our nation and people.
He's the PUP National Secretary General Moses Kuya. They're reading the press statement on behalf of the three political parties. The Environmental Protection Agency, with support from the Environmental Justice Foundation, has embarked on a two-day deliberation aimed at reaching a treaty on the biodiversity areas beyond national jurisdiction in Monrovia. Speaking at the ceremony marking the beginning of the deliberation, the Director of Multilateral Environmental Agreements at the Environmental Protection Agency, Arthur Bickert, reminded Liberians of the responsibility in safeguarding the planet biodiversity. Bickert, who served as proxy on behalf of the EPA Acting Executive Director Duet Bully, said Liberians must sign the treaty on the preservation of all the species beyond the national boundaries.
We are reminded of the incredible responsibility that we collectively bear in safeguarding our planet's biodiversity and also the rich biodiversity that Liberia has, especially in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. These settings comprise vast ocean landscapes and are essential to the health of the global environment, supporting countless species and contributing to the livelihood of millions of people in Liberia. The DBNJ Treaty Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty represents a crucial step towards enhancing international cooperation and governance concerning the conservation and sustainable use of the marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Liberia is a coastal nation rich in marine resources. We recognize the vital importance of this treaty to our environmental sustainability and the need for our active participation as a state party. We will engage in consultative dialogues, sharing valuable insights, and conduct a thorough need assessment that is crucial for the effective ratification of the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Treaty. Our discussions will focus on identifying our current capabilities, the challenges we face, and the support required to implement provisions of the treaty effectively. It is a unique opportunity for us to reflect on our existing frameworks and explore avenues for strengthening our local and regional corporations and capacities. I encourage all participants to approach this workshop with an open mind and a collaborative spirit. Your expertise, whether from government institutions, non-governmental organizations, academia, or the private sector, will be invaluable in guiding us towards a more comprehensive understanding of the needs and opportunities in relation to the
He's the Director of Multilateral Environmental Agreements at the Environmental Protection Agency, Arthur Bickert. What if you just joining us? A reminder you're listening to King's News Run, the 45 minutes news presentation about Liberia, Africa, and the rest of the world. Today is Tuesday, April 29, 2025, and I'm Newton to representing. Stories we're following here this morning. For National Intelligence Unit Agency of Liberia finds Lone Star Cell MTN Mobile 25 million Liberian dollars for failure to comply with the country's anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism compliance policy. Center for Transparency and Accountability warns President Joseph Boakai, a majority bloc against defiance of the Supreme Court ruling, says lawmakers who are supporting Richie Cohn and the executive continued engagement undermines Liberia's democracy and constitutional rule. National Patriotic Party acting national chairman says Liberia would never experience another war without the MPB endorsing plans surrounding civil conflicts. Josh Bower calls on President Joseph Boakai to engage stakeholders to resolve the nation's hatred and reconcile the citizens. And away from Liberia, at least 68 African migrants have been killed in the U.S. airstrike on the detention center in Houthi-controlled northwestern Yemen, the armed group TV's China says. A quote case which found Nigeria's leading football bodies to be negligent, but the death of a player has been hailed as a landmark ruling by Global Players Union. 5th Pro. We take another break. When we come back, we continue the program. And thanks for rejoining us and welcome back. The United Blind Association of Liberia has expressed disappointment on officials of government, civil society organizations, and non-governmental organizations for what they describe as neglect of people with visual impairment in the country. The association's president, Wilfred Jiwon, said the consistent disregard shown by public officials is a reflection of a broader societal indifference to the plight of disabled persons in Liberia. Reverend Jivan spoke during the program marking the 30th anniversary ceremony of the United Blind Association of Liberia, held in the township of Ghana's on Monday. According to him, the issues of people with disabilities is not taken seriously, adding that it continues to affect disabled community in several directions.
There should have been no space here. But you know, when it comes to persons with disabilities issue, nobody take our business serious. It's just always business as usual. But must it stop us from celebrating? Because when you don't make yourself happy, nobody will make you happy. Thank God the journalist is here. The news will go. We wrote more than 30 institutions, including line ministries and agencies. Where are they today? Where are they? People who should promulgate why persons with disability should have better living. How will they talk about us when we invite them to our program? They don't come to our programs. The program should have started since 12 o'clock today. The guest speaker of internet is coming, saying right to FPRC Junction. From FPRC Junction here, I think it's more than from Lofa here.
He's the president of the United Blind Association of Liberia, Wilfred Jiwon, speaking. The former president of Liberia Council of Churches has called on President Joseph Boakai to allow his name to go down in history as a Liberian leader who governs in accordance with the rule of law. Bishop Carter Brown, General Overseer of the Apostolic Pentecostal Church International, said it does not augur well for the executive to downplay the decision of the Supreme Court. He told reporters Monday during a press conference in Barnesville that it is important that the majority and minority blacks of the House of Representatives accept the ruling of the Supreme Court. The former president of the Liberian Council of Churches said Liberians are tired and overwhelmed by the prolonged impasse at the House of Representatives.
First and foremost, I want to tell the court thank you. In December, when the court made the first ruling, we all complained. And for we who are non-lawyers, the space was limited for us to even argue. When you say ultra-virus, to insult to injury, the agents of the court, the lawyers couldn't agree. I think the court was as clear as it can be so that all Liberians will understand the ruling. They say that the speaker was improperly removed. So what do we do now? When Supreme Court says something like the final, my personal reaction to what the Supreme Court said is that we have to obey. The country has to accept the Supreme Court's ruling because it's in the interest of the country. It's in the interest of the rule of law. It's in the interest of good governance. It doesn't look nice, the government to be saying to not honoring the ruling of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court rulings are not always rulings that you may like, but we have to accept them because our law says, our constitution says that on constitutional questions, the Supreme Court is the final judge. So we appeal to all national actors to kindly consider. But now we ran into darkness. Even those who agree, disagree, we all understand what the court is saying. I think that the actors We can get over this. We can walk past this point by doing the right thing. We just appeal that that's the whole issue. In my mind, the ruling of the Supreme Court doesn't promote the individual. I think what it does, it promotes the rule of law. And interestingly, under President Baka's watch, this is a major development. And I think that you seize on it. There will always be misgivings. There will always be concerns. There will always be the questions of how do we do this? How do we do that? But we all know that when the Supreme Court rules that we are they're supposed to follow.
He's the former president of the Liberia Council of Churches and the general overseer of the Apostolic Pentecostal Church International, Reverend Kotu Brown speaking. And finally, away from home, at least 68 African migrants have been killed in a U.S. airstrike on a detention center in Houthi-controlled northwestern Yemen, the armed group's TV channel says. Masirat reported that another 47 migrants were injured, most of them critical, when the center in Sada province was bombed. It posted graphic footage showing multiple bodies covered in the rubble of a destroyed building. A U.S. defense official said the U.S. military's Central Command was aware of the claims of civilian casualties. The strike came hours after Central Command announced its forces had hit more than 800 targets since President Donald Trump ordered an intensification of the air campaign against the Houthis on 15 March. A court case which found Nigeria's leading football bullies to be negligent for the death of a player has been hailed as a landmark ruling by the Global Players Union FIFPro. Martin Chidima died aged 25 in March 2020 after collapsing on the pitch while representing Nasarawa United in Nigeria's top flight, which was administered by the league management company, now known as the Nigeria Premier Football League Board, a body that sits under the Nigeria Football Federation. Over 5 years later, the club and the LMC and NFS Christian Moba, the match commissioner, were all adjudged to have failed in their duty of care for the player. While there have been previous negligence cases in Nigeria, this is the first regarding negligence in sport. On that note, I would like to go home on King's Newsroom, but just before we go home, let's remind you of stories we've been following. Financial Intelligence Unit Agency of Liberia finds Lone Star Cell MTN Mobile $25 million Liberian for failure to comply with the country's anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism compliance policy. Center for Transparency and Accountability warns President Joseph Boakai and majority bloc against defiance of the Supreme Court ruling, says lawmakers who are supporting Richard Cohn and the executive continual engagement undermines Liberia's democracy and constitutional rule. National Patriotic Party acting national chairman says Liberia would never experience another war without the NPP endorsing plans surrounding civil conflicts. Josh Moba calls on President Joseph Boakai to engage stakeholders to resolve the nation's hatred and reconcile the citizens. And away from Liberia, at least 68 African migrants have been killed in the U.S. airstrike on the detention center in Houthi-controlled northwestern Yemen, the armed group's TV channel says. A court case which found Nigeria's leading football bullies to be negligent for the death of a player has been hailed as a landmark ruling by Global Players Union FIFPro. These are stories we follow here this morning on King's News. My better still join us this afternoon at 1 o'clock, at which time we'll be here with another splendid edition of the program. Many thanks to all of our reporters, correspondents, news editors who help in making this package a success. My name is Newton TOKPAH. I presented this edition of the news program. Thanks for listening and watching. Bye-bye.